Welcome to an episode on the Estelle Ingenuity podcast. I'm Stephen Estelle, engineer, CEO, and founder of Estelle Ingenuity. In our episodes, we dive into different experiences from people who specialize in technology, entrepreneurship, and other necessary elements that will help you reach your full potential in these fields. We focus in on innovative devices that will be changing our society, stories from entrepreneurs and how they maneuver through the business landscape, and how these new technologies are being used in businesses to bring value to the world. From these stories, if you are inspired to develop your own inventions and prototypes, and you want to see your innovative ideas flourish, reach out to us at estelleingenuity.com for your prototyping needs, so together we can begin creating the new devices of the future. With that being said, enjoy the show, follow and subscribe to Estelle Ingenuity Podcast, and relish the wisdom from the topic you hear today. Okay, so for our episode today for the Estelle Ingenuity Podcast, I have Dr. Lécuyer here on the show today. And I've seen some of your TEDx event talks, as well as reading some of your research papers and also going to some of the seminars that you have given. And I feel like you have a really good insight on some really cool technology and innovative things going on. So welcome. And please give us a nice introduction of who you are and things that you really enjoy doing.
Okay, thank you for the introduction. My name is Anatole Lécuyer.
Okay.
Coming from France.
Nice.
From the west part of France, the Brittany region on the west, the far west of France.
Okay.
And I'm a researcher at INRIA in France. INRIA is the French National Research Institute in computer science. And I've been leading a research activity on the topic of virtual reality for the past, let's say, 20 years.
Okay.
In Rennes. And I started in 2002 in Rennes. I did my PhD actually in Paris area between 1998 and 2001. PhD on the topic of virtual reality and haptic interfaces and technologies. I guess we will talk about this.
Yeah, for
later
sure.
on.
For sure.
And
yeah.
After my PhD, I got recruited, let's say 1 year after my PhD, by INRIA, the French National Research Institute, in Rennes. So I moved from Paris to the west in France, and I started to work in this institute, and I never regretted this choice because it's a great position in France to be pretty free actually to conduct your research in a nice environment, research lab, on the topic of virtual reality.
Okay. Now that's good to hear. So the first question I want to kind of ask and kind of start diving into things is, what actually got you first involved into this whole computer brain interface idea, VR, and what kind of got you into that idea?
Yeah, I guess the initial motivation actually was not very clear. I started at school, I was pretty good at math and physics, so quite naturally I was embarked and in science studies and engineering studies, but I didn't really choose it. I mean, I didn't think too much about it. It was quite natural because when you are at school in France, when you are good in maths,
I get that.
Then you get quite rapidly enrolled or engaged in this kind of paths and studies.
Yeah, it's happened to me.
So so you know what I mean.
Yeah. It's like, oh, you're an engineer. Yeah.
And so I was in this case supposed to become an engineer. But after my engineering, getting my engineering, being accepted in this engineering school in France, actually I got this moment when I was more, facing a lot of personal questions and I was really wondering myself if I really wanted to become an engineer, actually. And the answer at this age, it was like a long time ago, but in the middle of my engineering studies,
right,
I thought, no, I don't want to become an engineer, actually. I want to become an artist. I want to become, actually, a drawer. I wanted to draw and to make comics.
May I actually ask real quick to interrupt? I feel I see an engineer as an artist that uses math. What do you think of that?
Well, at this moment, I didn't feel like this at all.
Yeah.
I was more considering that if I really wanted to play with creativity and to really have fun with what I was doing, it was more. I was more. I had to change the path, and I had to become maybe something different. So it was a difficult moment actually for me between this hesitation between becoming an engineer and doing something else. So I started to draw a lot. I used to draw since I'm a kid, and I like to draw, and I make a lot of drawings still today.
Nice.
So at this moment of my life, I really hesitated in continuing my engineering studies, and fortunately, my father convinced me not to quit.
That was it.
And told me maybe you can still continue to do your engineering studies and develop your artistic skills in parallel, and maybe in the end you can mix these two in the future. So that's what I did.
I like that. Yeah.
And in the end, I discovered the field of virtual reality, which for me at this moment, it was the late 90s. It was a very good mix between computer graphics, so somehow graphics,
right,
and science. So it was a good mix. This topic of virtual reality was a good mix for me between science, mathematics, computer science, and a very good path for exploring creativity in graphics, and in 3D computer graphics notably. Which was fascinating me actually at this moment.
That makes sense actually. That's a good combo. And funny enough, I had a very similar moment where I was thinking about dropping out of engineering, and for me it was my mom, and she said, same thing, keep going, and then here we are doing science. But that's actually really amazing to hear. So I'm guessing you have no regrets.
No, actually, so I had this instinct that this field was probably a good path to explore.
Right.
And during my PhD, after really I had this, I was lucky to feel this very, very unique moment where when you just discover that this really perfectly matches your aspirations.
Nice.
So that was really, for me, I was so lucky.
Nice.
I mean, after, let's say, 1 year or two of PhD, it was obvious that was exactly what I wanted to do and to continue to. Actually, I was not thinking about it. I was just discovering a passion, really a passion about my topics. So I was dreaming, thinking about my PhD topic. I was
that's
eating and thinking about it. And I mean, I was completely invaded by my PhD topic.
Yeah.
Liked it. Actually, I built it. I was working as an engineer for 1 year.
Yeah.
And I contacted different labs, different people, professors, to really define my own PhD topic with all the keywords I wanted to explore. So that's pretty unique in France, actually. But I assembled all these pieces and designed my PhD topic on haptics for virtual reality, which was fascinating actually at this stage.
That's awesome, actually. It's cool to kind of hear you going from being interested in math and art to kind of going to VR, which seems like the nice marriage between these two kind of fields. So that was a good story. Thank you for that. So I want to dive into some of the topics, starting from the TEDx event and the topics that you were talking about in that presentation. And I want to make sure I get it correctly, but you mentioned something along the lines of like the Proteus Effect. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah.
And with the Proteus Effect, it was something about having a perceived sixth finger in this VR world, and the person kind of feeling that they had a finger, but not really, and kind of going through that. Can you give us a little bit of explanation of that research that you've done and some cool findings from that? Yeah,
sure. So this is one hot topic at the moment in the virtual reality community, this notion of avatars. So this creature or representation of yourself in the virtual world,
right,
that you are embodying in the virtual world. actually it's teasing because it's raising both very strong technological challenges to make it very look realistic, to animate it in a realistic way, to make you feel that you're really inside this virtual character. But it's raising a lot of also of psychological, behavioral neuroscience questions and issues related to virtual embodiment. What makes you feel and believe that you are owning this very strange, for instance, body, an unusual body from yours, right? So this is what I like in this topic of research. It's that it's combining both advanced technologies and also very profound psychological and perceptual questions.
Right.
And one of the research results that can, for instance, stress this is our famous six-finger illusion. Indeed,
yes,
it's a situation where we tested how far can you go in this virtual embodiment. And for instance, can you believe in being in a virtual body which is very different from yours? For instance, a body which is completely dysmorphic compared with respect to yours. Like you have an extra limb. Here it's an extra finger at the level of your right hand. So we have this procedure where we you put a VR headset and you look at your hand and you see here a very realistic virtual hand superimposed with your real hand in a very precise way. And there is only one thing which is a bit weird here, is that there is an extra finger in this virtual hand. So there is a sixth finger in this virtual hand. So after that, you put your hand on the table and there is an experimenter in front of you with a brush and he's brushing your finger with a real brush. And in the simulation, there is a virtual brush. And when the virtual brush passes over the sixth finger, of course, we must cheat here. Because the virtual brush is passing over a limb which doesn't exist. But in real life, the experimenter actually passes in a very synchronous way with the virtual brushing of the sixth finger on one of your real finger.
Okay.
And it must be very well synchronized, but when it does, the tactile sensation that you feel with the real brushing of this other finger is very well mapped onto the visual brushing of your sixth finger.
Okay.
And in like 2 or 3 brushes, you start to feel your sixth finger. And you start to embody really physically your extra finger.
So that's the part I'm curious, like, and like you mentioned, like, how far can we stretch that? Where, like, and this can be input into entertainment, or just the video chat. And what do you think is, I mean, of course, a finger is maybe just a small limb, but do you think, like, can it get crazy, you think, and people start getting into, like, a VR game and then maybe embodying, I don't know, some other, let's say, avatar that's not human?
Yeah,
a little extreme.
Well, that's actually, this six-finger illusion is very strong, very powerful. It's one of the most powerful demos that we have in our lab. It's working with nearly everybody. It's very, very impressive, especially when you, there is one moment of the demo when you go back to a 5-finger hand. So pressing only one button, you can change your virtual hand.
Okay.
Changing from 6-finger to 5-finger, right? So it's becoming instantaneously a 5-finger virtual hand. But then at this moment, what is really weird is that you have the feeling that one of your finger has been cut. And that's very strange. It's even more revealing the power of this illusion.
Yeah.
Because you feel that some of your limb has been cut out.
So I'm curious about, it's, so they have like the, I think they just call them the drunk goggles or the inverted goggles, where it looks like you're walking upside down. And I think there are some tests where people wore them for a long time.
Yeah.
And then you adapt it.
Yeah.
So I'll be curious if somebody went through this study for like an entire day. I don't know how.
Yeah.
And then I wonder how that would, like, I guess, feel. Like, do they actually feel like they can move it themselves more so than just feeling like sensation from it or something?
Yeah, we didn't try like long-term exposure to these dysmorphic virtual bodies, right? But But even with very short exposure, I have one person who passed this experiment, which told me after that, like months after when I met her, I met him, he told me that he can still evoke the sensation of this artificial sixth finger if he wants to. So it's an extreme case. It shows that it can, in some cases at least, it goes quite profound, quite deep, and people can still remember or evoke this feeling, like even months after.
Do you think there's some correlation of where that sixth finger is located, like in between or on the outside of fingers?
Probably. So it clearly requires a lot of extra follow-ups, extra studies or more studies to continue. And it brings me to this Proteus effect also, which is another very teasing effect, psychological effect, which is observed in virtual reality with avatars, virtual embodiment. It's a classical stereotype psychological effect or bias, meaning that if you are disguised in a certain way, in a certain character, you have a tendency to behave like the stereotype which is
it's like of the person
inherent to this character and to disguisement.
Right.
So meaning that if you are in a virtual avatar which is like a very powerful barbarian,
right.
well, you will probably behave, being more maybe aggressive or
very heroic.
Right?
Yeah.
So this effect has been documented and very well observed in many different studies in virtual reality, where when you embody certain type of virtual avatar, then you would globally, so it's a tendency, right? It's a statistical tendency, but globally you would observe that there is a bias toward the behavior which is corresponding to the stereotype of this avatar.
I like that. I feel like, I mean, the first thing for me, just as a gamer, I'm imagining like if you get that and you get into some kind of like action-packed game and the influence that would have on somebody, or even if you then put that into like a movie, and if you found a way to kind of interpret this into, I am in the movie more so than I'm spectating the movie. That would be kind of interesting.
Yeah. It's being in the skin of the actor, right?
Yeah.
We have this other study which is pretty interesting too. We played with virtual shadows, so we're using projections.
Okay.
You are looking, you are inside a virtual reality cave environment, so with projections around you, and we project a virtual shadow, and we change the gender of this shadow. So if you're a male, then you would see a female shadow, for instance, which is like following very precisely your movements, and you would somehow have a different gender shadow, right?
Okay.
And it was a very interesting study where people were found to be actually very well accepting this very different shadow.
Really?
And yeah, they were nicely embodying this other gender character via just a shadow, not an avatar this time. So just a reflection.
So were they like per se like acting more of the opposite, or like
so
were they just...
we didn't test the behavioral effect, but we asked about do you believe that this is your shadow? Do you feel that it's yours, that you are controlling it, that you are owning this shadow? And people are more actually surprisingly accepting this.
That's actually interesting. I wonder where that can go. Just moving that forward into the future.
Just with the shadow, I remember that we tested lots of different shadows, and I remember like being facing the virtual shadow of a cowboy, and instantaneously I was walking like a cowboy.
You got like ready to like draw and everything. That's interesting. That sounds actually like a very fun experience to have, to kind of like feel like almost you're being transformed, but temporarily transformed.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
It's and what is interesting here is that it can work even with just a simple reflection of you. Not like being completely disguised, like being inside a virtual realistic body, but just a shadow is working.
Interesting. So now I'm curious about then the next topic you were talking about, where there was the rehab studies and how people were using it to try to get better at walking and trying to improve their gait. And so if I believe, I think the TED event was about, was it a year ago, like 2023-ish?
2 or 3 years ago.
And I don't know if there's been any, I guess, following results after the TED event or anything like that.
Yeah. Well, this perspective is so now that we know and we are studying the effects, these very powerful effects of virtual reality on yourself.
Yeah.
But the question becomes, so what are we going to do with this? Are there some, and especially in our lab, a national public French lab, we want to promote good usages of this.
Right.
So we are considering different application fields for this. And one important field for us is health and medical applications. So especially we have a collaboration started years ago with Rennes Hospital,
right?
Especially the rehabilitation service of Rennes Hospital. And we believe that there are lots of applications of VR technologies in this field. So during the COVID crisis, actually, we started this project exploiting avatars and these very fascinating virtual embodiment processes for the purpose of rehabilitation, especially for COVID patients who are awakening from coma.
Right.
So I think it's the first time that VR technologies are brought in an intensive care unit.
Yeah, that's the part that was interesting to me.
That was very challenging because we are talking about people who are awakening from a coma, which, for instance, lasted like 2 or 3 weeks.
Right.
They are waking up, and I mean, just a few hours after they are awakened, we propose a VR HMD to these people.
And
they are in their bed.
Yeah.
Usually they're very, very weak, meaning they cannot eat by themselves, they cannot walk anymore.
Yeah.
So they have to learn all these gestures again. And what we are proposing to these people is a new rehabilitation approach based on VR, because during maybe 1 week, it's very complicated for them after they're waking up to do standard rehabilitation techniques, because they are very weak. And if they stand and start to walk, first of all, it's very difficult for them. They are too weak.
Yeah.
But there is a risk for a stroke.
Really?
Yeah.
Just from like standing for like
standing
the
up.
first time?
Yeah.
Okay.
So they cannot do a lot. So it's very frustrating. They are, prisoner of their bed.
Right.
So we are offering them this new tool based on virtual reality, where they put this VR headset on and they look in the VR headset and they start to see them inside a virtual avatar very closely resembling to them.
Right.
So they are embodying an avatar which looks like really close to their own body. And this avatar is standing up and walking. Although they are completely standing in their bed, unable to do that, they see themselves virtually walking. And we do that for 10 minutes per day during 9 days, 9 consecutive days.
Right.
And our objective and our hypothesis is that by looking at yourself walking, you are starting earlier your rehabilitation process in your brain and in your body.
I really like this. This was really cool. With just keep going. This was like really cool seeing when I saw this.
It's a fascinating project.
Yeah.
Because our intention then is that we hope that with that, they would start to walk again much earlier.
Right.
And we don't know yet.
Right. That's what I was curious about.
I mean, it's a very complex clinical evaluation.
Okay.
In intensive care unit, people are in very difficult situation. So it's a very long and complex procedure.
Right.
So we are I think we have included 40 patients yet. And we still miss like 10. And before that, we cannot open the data, right?
Understandable.
So it's the ethics of research. So we don't know if it's working, but we have, good reasons to believe that it does. So
okay.
Let's meet in 1 year, right?
Yeah, I was like, all right, I wonder if they have the data, because I was so curious. Because, like, when I was doing my undergrad, so I did biomedical engineering, and then I went to mechanical engineering. Because initially I wanted to go into engineering I wanted to try to find a cure for cancer, and I was trying to implement engineering solutions for medical problems. And then when I hear solutions like this, which is implementing some virtual reality solution to these medical issues, I thought that was actually like a very innovative and new idea and a new approach to these new ideas and problems that we're facing. And I don't know, that's why it was like very cool.
Yeah, that's really what we are trying to push forward for these technologies, to find really very innovative context for positive applications.
I like that.
And it's a path that we are really trying to take since like 3 or 4 years.
Right.
And we have 3 or 4 ongoing projects like this one, on different topics. So one of them is rehabilitation. The other one is with Alzheimer patients, for instance, taking care of their spatial disorientation in augmented reality to provide guiding cues for these people who have lots of difficulties in reorienting themselves in their neighborhood, for instance. So we're exploring different paths for using these technologies to assist and support these people when they're navigating, for instance. So we have like 3 or 4, maybe 5 projects like these ones, which are extremely motivating for us. Like it's for us. We are really thinking that these technologies must be used for the good of people and for these kind of applications. And we have to be careful because the carbon impact of these technologies is probably going to be massive. So we have to collectively decide what are the good applications we want to promote for these technologies. And we are pushing in this direction.
I always think about, and I've had other conversations, like when new technology comes up, and the biggest one is like the artificial intelligence and things. It's not only enough to just create a device to help people, but I think it's also important to create a device and also making sure that it's not used for destructive means. And of course, people can be creative in how they use it for those kind of means, but it is good to, find these new innovative ways and then also making sure that they're used for the proper usage. And this kind of reminds me of, so I did a small internship at Cleveland Clinic. It's one of the big hospitals in the United States. And in that research lab, it was all about medical engineers. And we were working with individuals with Parkinson's disease. And their approach was using exercise equipment, or specifically forced exercise biking and equipment to help improve their physical gait and things of that nature. And I'll actually be curious if their research, I'll have to remember the exact lab and everything, but I wonder if they incorporated like your VR technology with this forced exercising activity to improve like the walking and the gait of all these individuals. I wonder if when you start adding things together, if it just maximizes and amplifies that.
So the answer is yes. The answer is yes, because we on this project we have like 3 or 4 papers published recently, which are showing that indeed, if you consider adding other sensory stimulations, other very consistent sensory cues in this setup, it can be beneficial for the patient, it can be beneficial for the user. It's maximizing the belief in what is happening in the VR, and then it's probably, but that's to be confirmed, increasing the therapeutical effect. But already the first papers that we have published are indeed showing that, for instance, we are using an automated bike, which is generating a cycling motion, right, of your feet.
Is it? Okay, so it's like a force pedal.
It's force pedal.
Okay,
right?
Yeah.
So here the person is still in this situation when you are inside this virtual body.
Right.
And looking at yourself, or in this avatar, looking at an avatar walking.
Right.
And at the same time, we are starting to add some other pieces of sensory information, right? So we have this automatic cycling motion, which is added, which is very well synchronized with the step movements. And this is increasing a lot the illusion of walking, or really walking, right?
That's
and then we are adding proprioceptive effect. And we have another paper where we added like vibrotactile feedback with our feet, right? So we have this set of vibrotactile actuators under the sole of the feet, and we're activating, following different patterns, these different vibrotactile actuators under the feet to generate the feeling that you are stepping physically on the ground, right?
Right.
And this is also increasing strongly the illusion of walking in this situation. So, and we have others. I won't enter into all the details, but we have many other ideas really like cool. This one to increase the walking illusion and, in the end, hopefully, increase the benefits for the patients.
I like that. It seems like you're bringing the virtual reality world to real life now. That was the end of an episode of the Estelle Ingenuity podcast. Hope you learned something new and innovative and were left inspired to go create and invent new ideas for the betterment of society. Make sure to follow and subscribe to the Estelle Ingenuity podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube for more stories and experiences from people in the field and to hear about new up-and-coming technology. Thank you for listening and see you in the next podcast episode.